Kirsch. All right. Time for our next presentation. We have Jeff Kirsch here. He's going to be talking about people, process, and technology, focusing on the people side. Give him a round of applause.
All right, so like he said, my talk is people, process, and technology, and as you can see, technology got cut off, and when don't we get cut off? So I left it that way. I thought it would just play it into what I was going to talk about today. First, I want to warn you, the views expressed here are mine and mine alone. They do not represent my family, friends, coworkers, employer, or any other person who may or may not know me. My insanity is my own. I say that every time, but it's still true. So just hold me responsible for what you hear. Before I tell you a little about myself, I want to get a kind of an idea about you guys. So who here in the room has kids that are in school now? Raise your hand. Okay, a few of you guys. You may not know this, but you may know this, that some of the concepts I'm going to talk here today about are actually being used on your kids in school today. And so this may actually help you with their education as well as what you're doing in your organizations, hopefully. So a little bit about myself. I am Ghost Nomad on Twitter. I'm a geek. I'm a husband, father. I write haiku on my blog. I wrote a book for it. I used to be an auditor. I put it in really small font. I could have gone smaller. Trying to sneak that by you guys. No, I did it for 14 years for the government and for an organization. And then I decided I wanted to have my heart back. So I switched to InfoSec. I've been doing that for 2 years. And the scar's starting to go away. So, you know, I'm still trying to fly low that I used to be an auditor, but it is actually part of who I am. And it did build on some of the things that I talk about here. I was a painter, blogger, gamer, avid reader, carpenter, and I probably should make it bigger now. I'm a cook. I took a resolution 2 years ago almost to try to cook something new every day, or every week. Every day, that would be quite a challenge. And I'm on a year and a half now. I've made something new every week. And it's teaching me not just a lot about cooking, but it's teaching me a lot about life and information security. So I want to give you some words, and right now these are just going to be words. They're not going to make much sense unless you've heard them before, but at least I want to throw these out for you. So the first words I'm going to say is response to intervention. And you're probably thinking, okay, this guy needs an intervention, definitely. And that's probably true. Response to intervention can also be referred to as RTI. So if you've heard this before, please don't tell anyone the secret yet. If not, we're good to go. Second thing is progress monitoring. Interesting words. And then the 3-tier model. Now, I do want to say, the gentleman before me gave a talk on training and awareness. If you were in the room, some of these things may be a little bit redundant, hopefully not. But hopefully I'm building on some different concepts that they didn't touch on. I think they had some great points about awareness is not training, and training is not awareness, and education is something completely different. What I really want to focus on is that training and education component, but in a little different perspective than what they did. Response to intervention has 3 components that you need to know about: identify, monitor, and intervene. I could go into it a little bit more now, but I'm going to hold off until I get to some more concepts with that. So when we talk about response to intervention, there's 3 concepts in there. And then the 3-tier model. The 3-tier model can be referred to as the pyramid of learning. It has a lot of other terms, but the idea is that there's 3 tiers to education. And this is used in schools today a lot more than it used to be. Tier 1 is your general tier. This is everybody. This is whoever your audience is. Tier 2 is specialized. I'll get more into that later. And then tier 3 is the intensive. So I kind of built a pyramid with the words. Give you the idea that as you go up the pyramid, the group that you're talking to gets smaller and smaller. All right. Now, traditional school. We all went through school, maybe just for a day, maybe for a long career. But there's a traditional perception that in school, you send the kid off, they go through this black box of education, and they come out with a degree. Everything's great, right? I mean, yeah, they have homework, and they have all these different things that they have to do, but you put them into the black box, and what you get out is a graduate, hopefully. The problem with that is that that's not what happens. And then we look at our organizations today, kind of a similar thing. We bring in the security guy. I call that Dave Kennedy because he's thinking about O-Day. I probably should have put dropping PEs since that's what he focused on today. But we bring in that security guy into our organization. Hopefully that's one of us. And what comes out is security, right? I mean, that's why we bring him in. Well, unfortunately, what we do is we equate education to compliance. So we think not only does our security guy make us secure, but he brings us into compliance. And compliance is not security, and compliance is not education. We need to have training and awareness to meet our compliance needs. What we don't want to do is sit there and say, just like with security, say, oh, I'm this compliant, so I'm secure. We know that that's not really the case. That's a baseline for where we need to start. It's the same thing with training and education. If you're meeting compliance, you're not really educating the people that you want to do. And the problem with education or training and awareness as compliance is it's pass or fail. Now, I gave a similar talk a year ago called Step Away from the Binaries. The idea is that pass or fail is a binary situation. You take a class, you either pass it or you fail it. It's the same way in school. You go through school, you either pass or you fail. Now you can say, oh, I got an A, a B, a C, a D, or I failed. But really, D through A is a binary pass. You've made enough of a grade to get that pass. There's not more detail behind how you got that. So the question is, do you want your training and education system to be a binary thing? Because when we talk about fear, uncertainty, and doubt, FUD, and security, we say that's not a good thing. That's not a way we should deal with people. We should deal with them on a level set. Well, pass and fail is one of the biggest FUD things in the world. I mean, how many of us got so scared the day we were having a final exam in school? Got a bunch of them raising their hands and shaking their heads. I mean, the fear that just overtakes you, you get that sense of, oh my gosh, if I don't do this right, I'm done. That's the same thing with education in an organization. Do we want people to feel that fear that if I don't pass, I haven't got it? Because ultimately, if they don't pass and they don't get it, like the two gentlemen said before, it's our responsibility. It's likely our fault that it didn't happen. But at the same time, as we come back to here, we're not secure. Because in the people, process, and technology side of the equation, we get process and technology, but people is our weakest link. And so how can we be secure if we can't get people to that state? The second part, the reason why I came back to this slide, showing our security guy coming in and making us secure, is our businesses generally aren't focused on security. Most of our businesses are focused on making a profit. They have shareholders, they have owners. We're here to make money. And so ultimately what happens is, as security folks, we come in and we say, you need to do this to be secure. And if we don't meet that security level, then we say, we're not secure, stop the presses, don't go forward. Well, what that does to our organization is our organizations start losing money. They start losing shareholder value. The shareholders aren't confident in the organization anymore, and people start to walk away. The company loses business, and what happens to us? We're not in the company anymore because there's no room for us. So what we need to do is to really focus on how can we make our organization secure, but do it in a manner that meets the organization's goal of making a profit. Now, there's compliance reasons why we need to do things, but beyond that, we should do it because we want to be the best organization in our field that we can be and bring in the profit and generate the money for not only the owners, but for the shareholders. And so I go back to talking about people, process, and technology. And if you know PHP, people is in the insert, server side include, people is a variable. So let's go ahead and let's talk about people. Let's talk about what we're going to insert before we hand this off. Before we can talk about people, we have to talk about intelligence. Now, if you've been through school, you may have taken some tests, Iowa tests, intelligence tests, various other tests to try to determine what your ability is. Really, intelligence is your ability to learn. When you talk about the IQ factor, somebody says, my IQ is this. What that really is telling you is that in the educational system as it's designed today, this is what their ability is. So if I have an IQ of 100, which is average, right? Then that's saying that I have a good chance of achieving the ability to pass in the educational system as it's designed today. If I'm below average, I may have a harder time, but my ability is where that is. IQ doesn't necessarily equate to real life. It can. If you're a smart person, hopefully you're going to do well in life. But we know that there's a lot of smart people that are book smart but aren't street smart. And we know a lot of people who have a lot of street smarts that aren't book smart. So when we say smart, it can really mean a lot of different things, but it doesn't necessarily equate to IQ. Now when we talk about IQ and intelligence, we have to talk about the bell curve. I don't know if you've seen this before, but it's a statistical, it shows a statistical distribution of people from the norm. So in the middle, we have, this is normal. To the direct left and right of normal, we have a standard deviation of 1, and that covers 68%, 68.2% if you want to be accurate, of the population. So 68% of the people that are out there just walking about, could be 68% of the people sitting in this room, but everybody here is smart. So we'll put ourselves up, maybe up top. I don't want to insult anybody's intelligence. But most of the people, 68.2% of the people that we deal with, anybody deals with, are normal, right? As you get farther out, it gets smaller, 13.6% on either side, then 2%, then 0.1%. So when somebody says that I have an IQ of 130, they're putting themselves in that 0.1% of the population. Now, we all like to think we're smart, and we probably all are pretty smart in what we do, but where would you put yourself in this distribution, this bell curve of intelligence? The reason why I bring this up is because when we get to the people part, we're dealing not just with the smartest people in the world. We're dealing with everybody. So we have to cater to this whole spectrum. We have to understand that when we design a training, awareness, education system, that we're not just going to get the cream of the crop, that we may not even be the cream of the crop. But we have to identify that we need to cover this whole spectrum. Okay, so who are the people? Well, first off, in our organizations, the people that we want to deal with are employees. This can be the whole organization. That's where your main training and awareness comes in. What's the password? Why you should keep it safe. It could go down even farther. It could be the developers of the organization. I know a lot of people talk about baking in security and that it needs to be in the development life cycle. Well, so the people in that case, those employees, may be your developers. The point is that each level of our organization that we want to deal with is going to require a different set of training and education. But people doesn't just cover our employees. We're a business, if you are a business. And so people also covers customers. You need to educate your customers as to what security is. Because again, you can do everything you want to do. You can make your web app secure. You can do everything possible. But if your users download something, if your customers download something onto their PC, laptop, smart mobile device, then their information is going to get stolen on their side, not on your side. And so we need to educate the customers. We also have to educate each other. You know, the people in this is peers. We come to things like B-Sides and other trainings and conferences and get-togethers because we want to learn from each other. So as peers, we're people. And then, of course, there's family and friends. Now, family and friends can be peers, they can be customers, they can be employees. The point is that if we as professionals go down to that base level and try to educate at the beginning, this will trickle up into the other areas of life. All right, so we talked about the three-tier model. We've talked about who these people are. I'm going to kind of go a little more in depth now as to what the tiers are and what they look like. So general level, tier 1, is your full audience. Now, in an education environment, this is your whole school population. These are all the kids. So if you're in an elementary school, first grade, it's all the first graders. If you're second grade, second graders. If you're an organization, this could be your entire population. Now, this may be where your training and awareness program comes in for compliance purposes. But we can use that to step into the next level. So one of the things we need to do for response to intervention is identify. So at this general level, we're doing, what do we want to educate? What do we want to teach people? It could be something simple as, this is why you need to keep your passwords safe. This is why you need to have strong passwords. This is why you can't click on an email that has a link, especially if it has a document and you don't know who it comes from. Whatever that may be, you need to tailor that to that full audience that you're looking at. Now you're going to have people in that audience that have different levels of understanding, but at this level, what we're talking about is that generalized program. The intervention is administering the program. It's delivering that training. So response to intervention at the highest level is just going out and doing it. In a school environment, this would be a teacher going to the classroom every day and teaching the math curriculum, right? All first grade is going to get the same math curriculum generally. And then monitor. Now, in the previous talk, if you were in here, they talked about monitoring baselines as not being as valuable. I have a little bit of difference with that. I think I agree to some point to what they were talking about, but in the end, for this type of program, you need that baseline. And I'll go a little more into that. So you need baselines and you need post-assessments. Now, let's take an example a little bit farther in an organization. You have your developers, and let's say your population is developers who do web apps. So we need to teach them the tools that they can put into the code before it goes into production that's going to protect your organization. Because once it goes into production, you're talking about putting a lot more cost into securing something than if you build it in. So you bring your developers in and you do things like you teach them about the tools of how they can test the system itself. Teach them defensive coding. Teach them all those things. But before you start that class, you should do a baseline. Now, most people think, okay, baseline, I got to give all the information. That's not true. In the program that my wife has administered in her school district, the baseline test is 1 to 3 minutes. So you sit down with a student, and you can go through an entire class of 20 kids in about 35, 40 minutes. Pull each kid out individually. So what you need to do is you need to develop a quick way to gauge the key points that you want to make sure that your developers know or don't know. Again, the key here is this is not a test. Use the word assessment, because when we hear the word test, we freak out. If you have had an audit, you may think of assessment as an audit, but really what you're doing is you're assessing the knowledge. So give them that quick 1 to 2 minute, what do you know? And give them multiple choice questions, get a baseline. And that baseline is really going to help you define, are you speaking to the right people? Did they understand what you told them? And did their knowledge base change? And then after you administer the training, after you've had them come in, do all the things, go back and give them the exact same questionnaire, the exact same quick assessment. Because if you change the questions, you don't know if something's changed or not, right? I mean, if I asked you one question before I started speaking, and then I asked you a question after I started speaking, and it was a different question, I could extrapolate as to how those things matched up, but I don't know that that's really the same information that you're giving me. So at the general level, your full audience, what to educate, and then get your baseline and post-assessment. Now, you've brought your developers in, you've given them the training on how to test what they do, code securely, and now you've given them the post-assessment, and you can one-for-one match by each person what they've gained. Now, what you do then is you take that and you go to your second tier. So now I know that 80% of the people that sat in the room improved. If they didn't already know something, their knowledge improved. They got what I taught them. They can move on, right? But there's that 20% that didn't quite get what we needed them to get. So now what we need to do is we need to move to a tier 2 specialized. So in this case, the people are small groups. This is your people that you've identified from the baseline to that first post-assessment. Did they get what I taught them, right? And you need to identify what was missing. What didn't they get? Why didn't they get it? And how can I present that? Not just re-give it to them, not just pull them in a room and, in the smaller group and say, okay, you guys didn't get this. Let's go through it again. No, what you need to do is you need to figure out, why didn't they get it? Is there a barrier to the learning style that you're giving to them? So If a person's hands-on and you gave them a lecture for an hour, that could be the only reason why they didn't get what you gave them. If they're quite the opposite, if you gave them a hands-on session and they're more conceptual, again, you failed to give them what they need. So giving them what's missing and not the full program is what happens in the second specialized level. Intervention is administering the program. So now you've identified what that is missing, what's the gap. You're bringing them in as a small group and you're giving them a new training. It may be a subset of what you already did. It may be a different style of what you did, but you're re-administering a program. And to monitor this, you use existing data. So you've got your benchmark, you've got your first post-assessment, and now then you're going to add a second post-assessment. So now you can track, here's where they were, they didn't make much progress, now how'd they do? And what you should see is more people start to fall off. Okay, now I've gone from this 20%, of that 20%, 90% of those people actually got it. So now your population of who gets it has gone up. But you're still going to have a small group of people that didn't quite get it. So you've brought your developers back in, you've given them a new training, whether it's hands-on, whether it's lecture style, whether it's, okay, tell me why you didn't understand what I was trying to convey to you. You've administered that, and now you've got that final few percent, maybe 5, 6%, that just still aren't getting it. This is your intensive level. And at the intensive level, you don't want to be doing small group stuff anymore. You want to be at the individual level. You want to be bringing somebody in and talking to them. Now, the caveat to all of this is that you cannot make this program feel like it's a punishment. And that's what sometimes happens in a compliance setting. When you give a test for a compliance and you say, you need to pass this or I'm going to bring you in for remediation, people freak out. Oh, geez. So now I'm the bad kid in the class. I'm at the back of the bus. That's not what this is meant to do. This is the whole point of specializing a program more and more detail is because you're not getting through to that person's learning style, or the content that you're giving them isn't matching up with what they're thinking. It's not because they don't know what you're talking about. They're just not getting it the way you're giving it to them. And what you need to do here is you need to identify those specific needs of that person. So in the case of the web developer who didn't get the first program and didn't get the second program, now you're going to sit down and say, okay, help me to help you, and what can we do to do this? We need to gauge their knowledge. We need to gauge their understanding. Maybe they just don't care, and that can happen. You could be at this level and find out that somebody just doesn't care. They just want to do their job because we all have a budget, we all have a timeline, and we all need to get it done. And yeah, I sat through your trainings and I get what you're saying, but in the end, my boss is going to hold me accountable for why my product didn't go live on the day we said it did. Well, okay, now you know where your gap is. Now you know what their specific need is. Or it could be something as to, I just wasn't comfortable in understanding what you were saying, and I didn't want to raise my hand in either of the previous sessions. But now that you're at the individual level, I'm more apt to talk to you. The intervention here is the coaching and the mentoring. This may be an extended program. This might not be just an hour-long thing. You may need to sit down and coach this person on an ongoing basis. And the monitoring is outcome-based. So now we're not giving them an assessment of the knowledge they know. At this point, we're saying, I'm going to give you a task. Can you accomplish it? Okay, now let's move on. And that's what mentorship and coaching is really all about. It's giving somebody things to do and seeing how they interact with that and how they accomplish the goal. If they can't accomplish it, you need to go back and find out, okay, where's the gap? And so really, when you talk about people, we're talking about unique individuals. Now, we can't tailor a program to each unique individual need. We have to generalize it enough and then move forward and go down and down and down. And so in this concept of response to intervention, you don't just design a program, put it out there. I do like, in the previous talk, they talked about doing a 3 to 6 month review and then doing an annual review and trying to see what you're getting. But this needs to be a little more, not just I need to retool my program because of that 3 to 6 month assessment. This means I need to redesign what I'm doing. I need to focus it on the general tier, specialized tier, or individualized tier. And Not only that, I want to give that same assessment. I want to keep track as it goes along. How are you answering those same questions? Because what you may see is after the training, people get it. A little bit longer, people may start to drop off. As it goes longer, it may drop off even more. And so that's when you know that you have to bring them back in. But at the same time, what you should see is that as you get to that general, specialized, and intensive level, they're going to have different needs of when they need to be refreshed. So you need to design based on that. You need to deliver it, progress monitor it, and refine it. It's a constant cycle that you go through. And ultimately what it comes down to is my program meeting the needs? Now, the reason why I started thinking about response to intervention in the sense of a business is because what we're finding, going back to the whole profit model, what we're finding is that people are making business decisions, and sometimes they're ignoring information security people. They're saying, yeah, I get what you're saying, but I need to make a profit-based decision. I need to ultimately look at what's the cost of what you're saying you're going to do, and what's the cost of me just moving forward without doing what you said. And a lot of times they can find a way to say, I'd rather accept the cost of not doing what you're doing and put the company at risk because I can pay a lot less for that. And so as security information people, you can become completely irrelevant to your organization simply because you're not meeting the needs of the people that you're working with. And so when you talk about, the example I gave was web developers, but let's take it a step higher and go to executives who are making decisions for your organization. They need to understand not just what you do, but the risks of not complying with secure practices. And so if you can educate them at a higher level than what you're used to dealing with and talk about, in their terms, risk, and get down to this is what we do, this is why it's risky to the organization, then when they sit down at the table to figure out what they want to do for their business, they may say, hey, you know what, I need to pull that information security group in here because they actually kind of get what I'm thinking. They kind of understand this whole concept of risk and profit and that we're not just a security organization. At the same time, what that does is it puts you in a better position that when things come up and new process and technology comes up, you can get it implemented because they're saying, this guy gets what I want to do for the business. And so when they go to make that decision of process and technology, I think they get what I'm thinking. And so it's really a twofold thing. One is to make your organization more secure because people is the weakest link and you need to ultimately get people to understand. The second thing, though, is that your business is making better decisions and they're including you instead of excluding you. You're not looking in from the glass outside, you're actually inside looking out. Now, all that said I write haiku at the beginning. And a while ago I wrote this haiku, just a box. Now, the concept that when I wrote this was about a piece of technology, firewall, router, whatever. It's designed to protect. You must configure properly, otherwise useless. Now, let's take this a step farther. So that's a device, but we're talking about people here. Designed to protect. Okay, so we need to design our people to protect our organization. We can't be the sole bearers of security. I think if you take a look at history and you say, I want to open up a bank and I never want to be robbed, so I'm going to do all of this. I can't tell you, it was probably hundreds, if not thousands of years ago that the first bank robbery occurred, whenever the first bank was. They're still occurring today. You can't stop it. And as security people, we know we can't stop it. Well, what we can do is minimize the risk. We can minimize those things that our organization takes on that puts us at risk. And so we need to design to protect. And in order to do that, we have to configure it properly. We get configuring black boxes. We can go into a device and issue all the commands to set the firewall rules, to set up the routers, to block people from coming in from the bad IPs. We can do all that stuff. But do we configure our people properly? Do we really make them a part of the organization's security program? Not just, here's some information, pass the compliance test so we can tell our regulators we're good, and let's move on and I'll just continue to try to build things around your inability to do things. It's not their inability. They have more important things to think about. We're security professionals. On a daily basis, we look into these things. If I'm a person who's issuing insurance policies, I don't care about that. What I care about is meeting my sales goals and understanding the product that I'm selling so I can sell it the best to the people out there that need it. So it's our job as security people to make the salesperson or the mortgage person or the investment guy understand that they're a part of security and how they fit into that. So we have to configure the person properly. Otherwise useless. Now, if you extrapolate this to people, that may seem a bit harsh, right? I mean, we don't want to call our people useless. But it's not our people that are useless. It's our program that's useless. We've designed the process and technology, and we've left the back door wide open. So all the stuff we've done, no matter how good we've made it, we've left the door open, right? I mean, we talk about social engineering and customers being hacked on their computer, so that their bank accounts are stolen off of their computer, not off of a hack into our system. So in effect, we've rendered what we've done useless, and we don't want to do that. We don't want to be the kids sitting in the corner while the grown-ups are sitting at the big table eating dinner. We want to be at that table making good decisions for the organization and showing them that we understand what they're doing. And ultimately, response to intervention is a way to get that. And the next question that I've been asked a couple times I've done this is, okay, so how can I get funding for this, and how much is it going to cost, right? I mean, that's the big thing that you really want to know about in your organization, because none of us have funding, right? I mean, I think the guys before me said that your funding is your paycheck, right? So ultimately, the concepts that I've talked about are very simple to implement at very little cost. If you really think about it, if somebody says, here, I want you to go do this, and you say, okay, my organization doesn't have this tool, they don't have this tool, and they don't allow me to down any of the free tools, I've got to use what I have and build what I need. And so ultimately that's what this is. Take the approach of, I'm not just going to go and implement this all at once. It's really, you need a proof of concept this in your organization. Take a training, find a few questions that you can ask beforehand, and ask them, whether it's through an email, whether it's through standing up a little survey monkey, do whatever you can through your organization's guidelines to ask those few questions of everybody that's coming to the training, and then follow it up. And then dump all that into your spreadsheet and go to the person who's in charge of setting up awareness programs and say, okay, this is what I found, right? I mean, it's pretty clear that I asked the same question and people made progress and people didn't. Another caveat I'll give is I don't do training and awareness. The guys before me did. That's not my role in my organization. So this isn't an eat my own dog food thing. I mean, I'm not telling you something I do because that's not my role. What I do know is that my wife does this. She doesn't do it in a organization for security. She does it in education. So she's responsible at her district for going out and administering the same type of program to students. And schools have no money. I mean, we think our organizations have no money. How many cities and counties and states are going bankrupt right now? So there's no money, there's no funding. And yet they find ways to implement these things. So I think in our organizations, the best thing to do is to take the information and go back and say, okay, how can I do this little by little? How can I start to show? And that's what we do with everything else. I mean, we say, well, I want to implement SIEM, right? I want to do logging. But my organization doesn't want to pay for the server to store all the data. So how can I gather little bits of information, little by little, to show that, hey, if we did this, it would be beneficial to the organization? And that's what we need to do. We need to be innovative in the way that we approach this so that it's not costing our organization a lot of money, but we can get that buy-in. All right. So I've gone on and on about response to intervention, progress monitoring, and the 3-tier model. If you want to talk to me about it beyond right now, you can email me, ghostnomad@ghostnomad.com. You can catch me on Twitter. I'm getting a little bit better. I was pretty frequent on it, started backing off, and I'm getting much better at it now. I have a blog, ghostnomad.com or it-haiku.com. If you want to read haiku about technology, IT Haiku is where you want to go. I have quite a bit. I think I'm almost over 700 now. So that can keep you busy if you haven't read it before. If you've read it before, I'm trying to do new content every day. Ghostnomad.com. I wasn't raised in the security field. I don't know how many people ever were. I came to it through an accounting degree, and I had done a little bit of computer science in college. So I tend to think of security not in a technology sense, but in the theoretical sense. So I try to marry technology to real-world situations. I haven't been as good, but I'm getting back into it. But I may take a police blotter and say how that equates to security. I may take what my kids do and equate that to security. Actually, on that note, I woke up this morning to, oh no, he's got a game hack, log off now before he finds our secret lair, from my 9 and 11-year-old. So I must be doing something right to get that geek news out there. But so if you want to read my blogs, that's where they're at. And at this point, I'll open it up to any questions. Sure.
internal hacker, et cetera, et cetera. But that's really a spectrum from your most, trusted, loyal employee out to the guy that's hacking the back door.
Sure.
We got a lot of folks in between. And so I guess just more as a comment, but also as a question, there really has to be a kind of what's in it for me. Really engage folks into why they got skin in the game to make sure that they increase their awareness when they do the practices that we're teaching them in such a way that they're going to be very active and aware about that.
Well, and to that comment, I would like to add an addendum. I think that, yes, our employees do have, we need to instill a need to want to defend the organization, but at the same time, as a security professional, it's our duty to make sure that we're giving them all the tools that they can have. So simply giving a once a year training on security is not going to do it. I mean, kids go to school for how many years, and at the end of it, we have a show like, Are You Smarter Than a Fifth Grader? Because half of us adults don't even remember what we learned in fifth grade. Right? So it makes us look like goofballs when you go into a show and a fifth grader gets a question that you don't. It's the same thing. As security professionals, we need to continuously push people the information that they need. So it's a duty to protect the organization. I completely agree with that. But it's also a duty of ours to make sure that we're giving those people all the tools to keep fresh on that information. Mick?
But on the flip side, I also have, for like about half your heads doubts about what our role as computer security professionals are.
Sure.
Because I suck at auto exams. Like I can't service my car. If you saw it, you'd be like, yeah, good. So when I go to the auto shop, I say take care of this, and they fix it for me, and there's this expectation that I don't need to understand all these things. But we as professionals are putting a hell of a lot of requirements on our end users of, no, this is a fishy thing. Like, why are they even getting the fishy thing? Why can't we protect them from that? And I get that that's hard because I do the pen test side too, but like, what are some things that we need to be doing so that that's a little less happening?
So the question is, how can we as professionals protect against the people? Right? And my answer to that would be, we need to continue to do what we do. We need to build those technologies. The bad guys are always going to find a way around what we build today. Right? I mean, we can't stop them from being more motivated than we are to break what we build. That's always going to be the case. So we need to just continue to plow ahead. I mean, I know a lot of people get despondent over, well, I fixed it today and now some guy broke into it tomorrow. I just recently went to the beach on vacation, and I decided to dig holes in the sand every day. And I dug it where I knew that high tide would bury it every day. And that the next day I went out and I dug the hole again. That's what we do in information security, right? We dig a hole, and the next day it's fill, because somebody's broken what we build. So I guess what I'm trying to convey here isn't that we need to make our users more aware, because I agree with you. When you go to the mechanic, you want the mechanic to fix it for you, right? It's the same thing. We can't expect people who are doing their job. You can't expect a doctor, previous guys, can't expect a doctor to have to worry about, does my password have a special character, a number, and an uppercase letter? We can't expect them. So we need to give them the tools, whether it's a password vault or make it easier to use a token or something like that. We need to give them the tools, but at the same time, the same way that your mechanic will say, okay, Mick, every 3 months you got to bring your car in for an oil change, or I can't help you. I mean, your engine's going to blow, and I can't rebuild it. It's going to cost you a bunch of money. That's the same thing that we're doing. We need to give them enough information so that in their daily job, if they don't feel comfortable with it, they feel comfortable coming to us, because we're not just going to throw all this technical babble about, well, the firewall blocked you and the proxy said this, and I'm going to build a reverse proxy to let you out, and Dave's going to drop PEs on you that are encrypted with base 64. We can't do that. We have to talk just like them. So I agree. I think that we need to keep building, and I don't know the answer of what the right thing to build is, because if I give you an answer today, it'll be broken tomorrow. And Dave will be the first one to break it, right? I mean, we can't help that. So we just have to keep plowing ahead on the process and technology, but we can't forget about the people. I guess that's my ultimate message. And this was just a way of a different approach to looking at how we can communicate with those people. Anybody else? No? I'm an open book, so ask away. All right, well, you know how to get a hold of me. Feel free to say that I'm wrong or whatever. I won't take it personal, because, as we know, we build things today and they get broken tomorrow.
Just a reminder, everybody, lunch is on your own. I believe they have a restaurant out here in the hotel, and there's a bunch around the area here. Our next talk is going to be at 1 o'clock with Adrian Crenshaw right here in this room. Thanks.